Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Goblins and Growlers podcast. I'm Josh Maltby at BlackCloakDM on Twitter.
I'm Brandon Dingus at Way of Brandalore on Twitter, Instagram, several other places, and you can find me on Discord as well.
We're going to be trying out a little something new this week, where Brandon has come up with a wonderful new segment that we're both very excited about because we feel like we don't highlight enough indie creators on this show. We love indie creators, and we find a lot of really cool stuff, and sometimes we find cool stuff that we don't feel like can fill up an episode.
Yeah, we've run into that a couple of times where it's like, oh man, this is really cool, let's talk about it. And then as we're planning out what we're going to talk about, we get to about like 15 minutes worth of content, and we're like, we actually do a lot of planning on this show, believe it or not. It's about 20 after 9 right now when we're starting to record this, and Josh and I have been on a call for like more than an hour trying to plan out some future episode topics, and we went down so many rabbit holes and got distracted so many times.
Let me tell you, I'm really excited for some of the stuff we have planned to record in the next like month and a half.
Yeah, but so today we're going to start off talking about indie game. I think we're going to call this segment Scratch That Indie Itch, because the gimmick's going to be we're just going to look on itch.io and find the indie TTRPG games that we like and want to talk about. And then we're going to be talking about the main topic of today's episode, which is our complete anticipation for Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel, which is actually coming out tomorrow as you're listening to this. For us recording this, it's not tomorrow, but the rest of you are time travelers, so go to your local gaming shop tomorrow and pick up a copy of it if that's your thing.
I'm excited to talk a little bit about our experience with looking at that game once we get to that segment.
Yeah, just a couple things up at the top. Thank you all very much for listening. Thank you for any 5-star reviews you want to give us. Telephone, telegraph, tell a friend about the Goblins and Growlers podcast. It really helps get it out in front of people. And, join us on the Discord, bit.ly/Goblin Discord. If you don't have anything else to do and you want to yell at us because we didn't pick your indie game that was up on itch. If you want to suggest your indie game to us, that's where you can find us. And as always, tweet us at Way of Brandalore, at BlackCloakDM, or if you want to get us both at the same time, at Goblins Growlers.
And I'm going to add, while we're doing bumper type things, we are going to be at Queen City Anime Con August 5th through the 7th. It is going to be a vaccine or negative test within 72 hours of event required space. Masks are going to be required. We're going to be doing panels. We're going to be running live games. We're going to be doing live shows. We're going to have a merch booth, so if you're going to have time to be in Charlotte, North Carolina, we would love to see you and your beautiful faces there, or at least the parts of your faces that won't be covered by a mask.
I'm glad you said that, because now I don't have to come up with a clever bumper to put at the beginning of this episode, like my Macho Man Randy Savage one I made with a soundboard the other week. Ooh yeah.
Ooh yeah.
Queen City. Yeah. Cosplay. Yeah.
If you need more details than that, go to queencityanimeCon.com, which is a beautifully simple website. And all those are going to be there for you.
Absolutely. We'll see you there. Hopefully. But Josh, let's scratch that itch.
Let's scratch that itch. So today we're going to be talking about a little game called Salt and Strife.
Yeah, and just to get this out of the way up front, you can find Salt and Strife at qwo.itch.io/salt-strife, and we'll put a link in the show notes on that, but please go check it out. Josh, what is the story of us stumbling on Salt and Strife?
So before Tess had the... Oh no. Yeah, before Tess told us that we should do
Did you just have a moment where you like, has that episode come out yet?
A little bit. I was like, wait, can I talk about that yet? Is that a surprise? But no one's watching this live right now. So before we were told that we should do cryptids for July 4th, we were like, oh, we should find a TTRPG that is super patriotic without being patriotic at all, because Brandon and I are not super patriotic people. So we were like, we'll find something that'll be like colonial era America, and it'll be like an adventure game, and we'll find a way to have that without it being really problematic. And I've got terrible news, which is basically all of those systems are problematic in some way or another. And finding one that isn't is nigh impossible, because every time I got really into one, I'd be like, oh, cool, yeah, this is going to be great. They'd be like, we've decided that the Confederate Army actually weren't so bad. And it's like, no.
We looked for a long time to try to find something that would fit in that round hole, but we found nothing but square pegs.
Nothing but square pegs.
But over the course of this intense Googling, came upon Salt and Strife, which I'll read just the blurb for it. It's Salt and Strife is a tabletop role-playing game set in the early modern period, circa 1400s through 1800s. It's a game about a troupe of adventurers who fight the villains of the age, hijack empires and kidnap societies, the vile upper classes, soldiers, and the so-called great men who command them. The heroes are pirates, vagabonds, brigands, or just honest common folk. Players are encouraged to smash the statues of traditional heroes of centuries past and erect their own instead.
Something I hadn't really thought about until we were putting together notes for tonight is that this system has very powerful Assassin's Creed vibes.
It kind of, now that you mention that, because we legitimately did not talk about this before we started recording, so this isn't a planted conversation. But now that you mention that, I'm 100% getting that.
Yeah, because it's all about historical figures are actually not as cool as you probably think they are.
Yeah.
Here's some facts about them and why you might want to stab them in their sleep.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different classes. There's the artisan, the barber - surgeon, the bloodthirsty, horrifying healer, the beast, someone or something deemed beastly by society, conjurer, a purported spirit talker, deserters are gangs of escapees. A harlot is a social creature who transgresses moral convention. The description for the leper is dying. The libertine is one of swinging fortunes. The pamphleteer is a printing press firebrand. The poacher is a lonesome hunter. The veteran is a disillusioned survivor. And the worker helps others. So those are the character classes you can play. And the entirety of the rules are on... each player gets a double-sided character sheet, and all the rules are contained in there that talks about rolling the dice, how you can do damage, your item supplies, your skills, your wants, all the different moves you have. I believe this is based on Powered by the Apocalypse. So if you're familiar with any of the myriad games built on that system, this will seem kind of familiar to you, especially with moves and things like that. And it's a 2d6 resolution mechanic for everything. So pretty much everybody has 2d6, so you shouldn't have any issue there. Oh, go ahead.
I've seen packs of cards that come with 2d6 in them. So, there's no excuse for not having 2d6 somewhere in your house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the author, whose name I wasn't able to find, so if you did this, please let us know. I'm going to actually once this publishes, I'm going to put a link to it in the comments of this. So hopefully they'll see it. But they say this is the second edition of Salt and Strife. So I guess there was an earlier version. And actually, this one isn't even 100% complete, if I'm being honest, because there is an appendix that has all kinds of stuff like a glossary of period-appropriate terms, things such as turnspit dog and clyster. And I'm not going to define either of those. You can look those up yourself. A list of armory items that you might find in the period, maps of the world at the time, cultural name charts, cultural ship names, cultural fashion, currencies. And then you get toward the end of the appendix, and it looks like there's a couple of blank pages that maybe were unfinished or just left unfinished for the time being. But regardless, it's still a wealth of information about the period that can help bring a lot of verisimilitude to whatever game you're trying to run in this. And like it says, it works between the 1400s and the 1800s, just sort of the early modern period.
Not to solely advocate for this creator, but it is theoretically possible that those pages were left blank intentionally so that if you wanted to add things of your own to the appendix,
That's 100% true. I can neither confirm nor deny that. Um,
We'll have to track this person down and ask them ourselves.
Yes. And they even are helpful, and they say, is Salt and Strife not exactly what you're looking for? Here are some other role-playing games set in the early modern period where players are neither great men nor soldiers fighting glorious wars of empire. And then it gives a long list. But I really like how this is just sort of down-to-earth take on just how awful the early modern world was to everybody. The GM gets their own double page of rules that's separate from the ones the players get. And it's got the GM's maxims on it, and some of them are: make the early modern world seem nasty, colorful, and unfair. Cast down great men. Keep always striving against those in power. Like getting the party to do that. So it's not exactly tearing down the whole the great man theory of history, but it's acknowledging the great man theory of history and saying, let's burn it to the ground.
If you're the kind of person who has been constantly talking about how they would love to just wheel a guillotine out into the streets and, take care of problems, odds are good this book is for you.
Yeah, definitely. And it's pay what you want, and you get four files. You get a roll sheet, which is essentially the character sheets, the GM sheet, the troop sheet, and the appendices. Throw this person some money. And then they, 3 months ago, in their own comments on this, they dropped some thematic music inspiration, like violin concertos and things. And I listened to one of them yesterday, and it really fits with everything. So check this out, Salt and Strife. It's qwo.itch.io/salt-strife, and like I said, we'll put notes we'll put a link in the show notes. The art style is really cool. I think a lot of it is just public domain art that they've grabbed, but it just fits thematically perfectly with what they're doing. I'm really looking forward to trying to run something in this once I have some time. But definitely check it out. And this is what's scratching my itch today.
Let's talk about the slightly meatier content for the evening, which is Journey Through the Radiant Citadel, which we've already mentioned is something we're going to talk about, coming out tomorrow as of the release of this episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure some people already got it. They snuck it out the door of their friendly local gaming store, this evening or the evening before or anything like that.
They know a guy who'll let them get it out of the box in the alley in the back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Josh, nutshell, Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel for us.
So as I understand it, the concept is that it's going to be a bit more of an adventure and setting book.
Mm-hmm.
There is a kind of an asteroid situation where there's a society that's living out in space. They are on a hub location. The hub location is connected to a bunch of places via portals.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a bunch of individual societies that exist all in, I guess, congruence? Is congruence the word I'm looking for with each other?
Not quite, but it works.
You can tell my brain's not entirely here.
Also, you're mostly right, but you're also a little wrong. It's not out in space. It's out in the it's deep in the ethereal plane.
Oh, that's right.
You're thinking of Spelljammer, Josh.
Look, we've talked so much about Spelljammer. Everything is in space now.
Mm-hmm.
Ethereal plane, material plane, whatever it might be, it's all in space.
I'm not gonna lie though, you could just replace ethereal plane with space, and this would make just as much sense.
Well, even the co-lead designer was like, yeah, it's very solar punk.
Yeah, so it's really an anthology book. It's along the lines of Candlekeep Mysteries that came out last year. It's got 13 unique adventures that vary in level from 1 to I think 14 or something like that. And it introduces the Radiant Citadel, which is a hub location in the ethereal plane, and it connects other locations. It connects 2 other locations on the material plane. So the real hook for this is there's all these different cultures that are living together at the Radiant Citadel, and they've all emigrated there from the locations on the material plane where their different cultures are from. and we'll get into a little bit sort of like the mechanisms for these things. But like the really cool hook for this is sort of the meta reason why it's interesting, and part of that has to do with why Josh and I didn't want to talk about this game in the first place, because it was a few weeks ago, I think, we were talking about what we should discuss, and then we're looking at what's coming up on the Wizards release schedule and everything, and this book had actually gotten delayed. It's interesting because it was originally supposed to release in June, but production issues forced a delay of a few weeks, and Polygon.com had some reporting on it, and it says that the Rules expansion gift set, which was another product that came out, it was printed in China, and that's why it was delayed. It was another product that was delayed by a little bit. And then Polygon asked whether those international logistics also played a role in the delay of Citadel. And the quote from Wizards was, "Production and logistics in the US and abroad are continuing to see complications and difficulties. We produce D&D products in a variety of locations to mitigate reliability risks, as well as get the game to our players faster, and will continue to do so moving forward." So Radiant Citadel encountered domestic production issues that came up like really late in the process, which is why the release date had to be pushed. It's odd to me that it had to be pushed only by a month. Usually when you think about production delays, you're thinking more of like a 2-3 month delay timeline on there. But anyways, that's why it's coming out tomorrow, and it didn't come out last month. So
well, I think it's worth noting that most of the time that you have production delays, it's because the product has not been finished so that it can be shipped off to the printers. This, to me, honestly sounds like they finished the product, sent it off to the printers to get printed, and the printers were like, I have some bad news for you guys.
Yeah. If I had to guess, I would say it probably was a supply chain issue with paper or wood or pulp or something like that.
Exactly.
I'm taking a wildly uneducated guess, but that's what we do on these kind of quote unquote news discussion podcasts, is we wildly speculate. But anyways, sort of getting back to what's interesting about this. I don't know if anybody remembers when Candlekeep Mysteries came out last year. I'm guessing this is something that maybe flew under a lot of people's radars, but there was some controversy, at least from one of the authors, about sort of some of the aggressive editing that Wizards did to the story that they submitted. Like, they cut it down by like more than a third, I think, and they introduced elements into it. This author is a person of color, and they introduced elements into it that were very much colonialism, that were not intended by the author, and it sparked a little bit of a Twitter firestorm for a few weeks. And I just kind of rolled my eyes, because I can understand the need to cut something down. Like, if you hire a contractor to write something that needs to be like 5,000 words and they give you 8,000 words, like, you have to cut something out. But it just seemed that they were actively inserting things that that the author had no intention of putting in there, like the sort of vague colonialism themes. And I think there might have been some like white savior stuff in there as well, from the adventuring party, quote unquote white savior, like that kind of archetype. But so having that in the back of my head, because I think Josh and I last year actually recorded an episode talking about that. But it was one of the episodes from the initial batch when we were trying to get the podcast off the ground that turned out to have really terrible audio, because we didn't think about something. Like, we recorded it all on one audio track, so we eventually just had to scrap it. And then the time had passed, so we didn't get a chance to talk about it at all.
I was going to ask if that was... I remembered having a lot of conversation with you about that, and I was like, did we record that? Is that somewhere in the feed?
No, it's nowhere. It exists. It exists on our Google Drive as a really, really crappy piece of audio that Alon just kind of threw his hands up at and was like, "There's no way I can save this, and I'm not going to try."
Oh no, you've told the fan base that the audio still exists somewhere. We were supposed to tell them that we buried it in an abandoned mine. No, it's somewhere east of town.
It's in the desert with all those ET cartridges. But anyway, so with that informing, so that was the last anthology book that they published, unless you count like the Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, which that's a whole other can of worms. But just as sort of a quote unquote new type of product, because Van Richten's tied to Ravenloft, but so something like different, something new. this is the next anthology book that came out. And I was just like, yeah, whatever. It just didn't excite me, and I wasn't super excited about talking about it because we've talked a lot about Wizards content lately, and I didn't want this to become just us talking about Wizards and standing for them in the hopes that we would get some kind of, promotional stuff from them, because I don't really want to be that way. But, if you do want to send me some books to give honest reviews of, I will happily receive them. You can send them to our P.O. Box, and we'll put the P.O. Box in the show notes. Wizards, if you're listening.
I was going to say, not that we'd be opposed, of course, to receiving free things.
But anyways, getting off the self-hype train a little bit. So this was something that escaped my notice until recently. I did not know that Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel was written entirely by Black and brown authors, and immediately that changed my perspective on it, and that I felt like we really needed to talk about it. And then once it comes out, actually get a copy of it and read through it and talk about it a little bit more. I don't know what your reaction to all that is, Josh, because I think we've tried to save this discussion a little bit for the actual podcast. So how do you feel about that, sort of stacking it up against what happened when Candlekeep Mysteries came out?
I mean, I haven't seen any buzz around this, which Wizards has been a little bit under the microscope lately for stuff like this. So I would expect that if there was buzz, I would have seen something.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen any buzz about things being misrepresented. Usually authors get their test copies a couple of months in advance of an actual release. So I'm feeling pretty good about this overall. There's the small part of me that's like, is Wizards just doing this for representation? But that's outweighed by, I can't sit here and be like, Wizards needs to be doing more with representation, and then be like, oh, but a book that's just POC, that's not acceptable. Why wouldn't that be acceptable? So I'm for this. I am absolutely for this. I hope it's really well executed. I hope that the authors really got to fulfill their visions in this book, and that what happened with Candlekeep Mysteries was a learning experience for Wizards, that they, got some sensitivity readers involved, made sure that they were more communicative with their authors about any changes they wanted to make, and from there are creating something that's really inclusive and really well established and very excellent all around.
Yeah, and the adventures are all inspired by the folklore, mythology, and lived experiences from the writers and the cultures that they came from. And that's according to Ajit George and Wes Schneider, who are the co-lead designers of Radiant Citadel. There's actually, this, I think we talked about this a little bit during our Spelljammer episode, but I discovered recently how pretty much on every one of these release pages, if you scroll down to the bottom, Wizards produces a couple or series of interviews with folks responsible for it, going into a lot of detail about stuff, which is great because they're doing my work for me in terms of researching this. They're condensing all this stuff together. Now, granted, that makes it a one source story because I'm getting it directly from them, but I think it's really important to get perspectives from the people in charge of the project. If I would advise anybody to go and listen to both of these, I think there's just one where Ajit is talking about what the Radiant Citadel is and sort of what's behind it and how the book came about. And then there's another one with both him and Wes Schneider talking about some details and some interesting new stuff that they've got. And we'll touch base on some of that as we talk. But it's incredibly worthwhile to watch those videos, especially if you have just... You want to get a real nice, digestible preview of what's coming up in the book, because you can get a lot from that since they're the people in charge of it, rather than trying to dig through Den of Geek or Dicebreaker or Polygon or Bella Lost Souls to try to find some solid nuggets of information. Just watch the videos at 1.5 speed. You'll be done in a few minutes. But Josh talked too about how the game is kind of solar punk, and that's how Ajit described it. He was just sort of going through talking about how to define the genre, and he says, it's solar punk. There's this better future that we have to fight for, and it's kind of a response to grimdark aesthetics and writing. And I don't know if he was maybe taking a shot at Ravenloft there, like a really like casual, friendly shot. Like, not everything has to be super serious and dark.
Honestly, I would wonder if he's actually taking a shot at Dark Sun.
I mean, it doesn't get much darker than that in terms of just scrapping around to survive, you know?
Because, like, that's been a lot of, like, what's on the tongue of folks as we're talking about things like Spelljammer. Is like, well, we've got Spelljammer now, like, how close are we to Dark Sun? And here's Ajit being like, it doesn't all need to be, you know, Spelljammer and Dark Sun. Like, we can have fun, too.
Yeah, well, until that day comes, I've got my reprinted 2nd edition Dark Sun book. That I paid like $30 for once I figured out you could pay to get these things printed, even though they were out of print. But let's dive into a little bit of the details about Radiant Citadel. I'm going to just read well, before I do that, I want to say Josh and I discovered something today because, like, I was putting together our show notes yesterday and doing some research. And I found on D&D Beyond, there was a Radiant Citadel product that was already available. I was like, oh, well, heck yeah. It was essentially like an offer that you could claim. So I logged in under the Goblins and Growlers D&D Beyond account and clicked on it. And it let me access this really fantastic, essentially it's a wiki site inside of D&D Beyond that just goes through Radiant Citadel. It's got features, noteworthy sites, the Concord Jewels, which we'll get into in a minute, life in the Citadel, groups in the Citadel, Citadel defenses, all this stuff. I was like, heck yeah, this is fantastic. So I put the link to it in our show notes, and then I sent it to Josh, and he looked at it tonight. He's like, it's just taking me to this page that says the product's not available anymore. So I guess I claimed it on the last day it was available, you know, like, 2-3 weeks before the book's actually released. I don't know. I don't care, because I got it, and it was immensely helpful. But I'll read from the sort of intro to the Radiant Citadel. And this is from the D&D Beyond info page that if you don't have it already, you can't get, I guess. That's just the way it goes. But against the unending mist and unseen terrors of the Ethereal Plane, the Radiant Citadel stands bright as a bastion of hope. It's a living relic of the ingenuity and collaboration of 27 great civilizations. Abandoned and lost for ages, the Citadel was resurrected from its slumber and reclaimed by the descendants of those societies, though some peoples remain missing. The city serves as a nexus of diplomacy and trade, a repository of histories and secrets, and a thriving sanctuary for those seeking safety or a better life. So it does cast a very hopeful tone right at the beginning. And then it talks about it being a miracle of architecture, a floating city carved out of a single massive... Well, that's another thing that we haven't really talked about. So the city is built on top of this massive fossil of this ancient creature that, the city is surrounded by that. And in the center is the auroral diamond, which is just this massive crystal spike that cuts through perpendicular to the city. And Ajit, in one of his interviews, was talking about how in his head this creature was nearing the end of its life, and it wrapped itself around the auroral diamond, maybe for warmth, maybe because it comforted them or whatever, but then it died and its body fossilized, and then other people were able to discover it. I think this kind of hub location out sort of in be it the ether, be it space, be it the ethereal plane, anything like that, I think it's a little tropey. I think it's a little overdone, but I don't think that gets in the way of it being like a really useful device, because one of the things, all right, well, this is like the next complicated thing about the setting, is the city is orbited by these things called the Concord Gems. And as they were describing this in the video, I just started thinking of them as almost like a Ferris wheel or something, how you get in those little compartments on a Ferris wheel and it just goes around. So the Concord Gems orbit the Citadel, and then they occasionally dock with the Citadel and you could board them, and then they go back out, and then they plane shift to the material plane. And that's how you can get from all these different civilizations' locations to the Ethereal Plane, to the Radiant Citadel. So that's how people originally came to the Citadel, and that's how people go back and forth, because it's a hub. So all these civilizations all across the material plane can trade, and trade knowledge, trade goods, things like that, because of the existence of the Citadel as a hub to connect them.
It definitely has very strong sci-fi vibes, where you've got like, there's the mining asteroid that's built out of the Celestial's head, a la Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, it's got that sort of general where it's like, yeah, there's a lot of societies that exist here and all kind of melting pot together, and it's all floating out there. I think that's part of why I keep thinking of it as being in space, because they're like, it's in the ethereal plane.
I mean, it's basically space.
Floating.
It's basically space, and then you get on these floating, like these flying stargates, and you go to other places. I mean, strip it all away, that's what it is. But I have no quarrel with the way they've dressed it up.
Oh, no, not at all. And I really love those sorts of like cultural melting pot situations, because it gives you an opportunity to have really interesting interactions with the party and the locals that you don't always get in slightly more, I don't know that vanilla is really the word I'm looking for, but more homogenous societies in a general high fantasy world, where it's like, oh yeah, this is the elven city full of elves. Like, you're going to be hanging out in trees, and people are going to be really long lived, and, etc.
Oh, like, here's an abandoned mine. I wonder what kind of people we're going to find down there.
Right. Like, you instead get this, like, collection of people. It ends up feeling a lot more like Los Angeles, where there's a ton of different kinds of people who are living a ton of different kinds of lives, all gathered in one place, forming one community.
Mm-hmm. So we've got the cultures all coming here to sort of commune, to melt together. Like, there's still strife, because in much the way that the Concord jewels allow trade and things like that to happen, it also makes it really easy to wage war against these other people, because you can just hop on, get some folks to hop on the jewels and then go invade another one of these civilizations on the material plane. Another really interesting aspect about this setting is the Dawn Incarnates, and so like we said, the auroral diamond is cutting right through the center of the city, and there's a thing inside it called the Preserve of the Ancestors, and you can access it by going in through the diamond. And in there are these Dawn Incarnates, and there is essentially the guardian spirits for each civilization. I don't remember what all of them were. Like, there was like a tiger. I know one of them was a pangolin, which I thought was an interesting choice, and I was happy to see it. But these are essentially totemic creatures that reflect the history of a place and its people. So that's how they're tied to these civilizations, and they take these animal forms. One interesting thing that I thought, I kind of liked just how upfront they were being about the description of this. Like, these creatures know, like, they're a literal manifestation of a place's mythology and history. So they know everything. So one of the things that was said was like, well, like, let's say your characters need to find out information about, XYZ legend or historical thing that happened. These people are perfect repositories for lore dumps. So you don't have to manufacture something silly if you really need to spell something out for your players. There's a built-in mechanism for that on here, and it also makes them sort of natural quest givers too. So you can start adventure threads on that as well. I thought that was really cool. I thought that was like it was a bit of a different take on things than what we've seen recently. The closest, and somebody is definitely going to correct me, or not correct me, but at least suggest that I'm missing something, which is possible because I pretty much skipped third and a half, and fourth edition. But when I was reading this, the closest thing it reminded me of was the Dark Lords in old second edition Ravenloft, where Ravenloft was like that whole demi-plane that was broken up into essentially different countries, and each one had its own Dark Lord. So something like that, but nicer.
Positive Dark Lords.
And there's also guidance in the book on how to include this in your homebrew setting, because obviously the Concord Jewels give you the ability to go back and forth and wherever, and there are actually like lost civilizations that are part of this too. So what's to say that this group that you created in your homebrew game actually isn't one of the lost civilizations, and then you could incorporate that into this. We talked about this a little bit at the beginning, but I really felt like this represents the whole concept of Radiant Citadel and sort of the meta plan that they had for putting it together. Really represents them learning from their mistakes, from not just the controversy with Candlekeep Mysteries, but also sort of that baked in racism from Ravenloft for so many years with the Vistani, that everybody, like, people knew that was problematic in 1984. They just didn't do anything about it. But it's really easy to criticize Wizards of the Coast. Often it is appropriate to criticize Wizards of the Coast, probably more often than not. But I appreciate that this at least appears to be a step in the right direction, where they're trying to look back and recognize that mistakes were made, but all we can do is try to move forward a little bit better. And trying to make it even seem a little bit more cohesive too. All the writers shared their notes with each other while they were writing it. So you've actually got these civilizations influencing each other as well, to help tie everything in and make it feel less like an anthology book, even though it's an anthology book.
And so you've got 16 writers writing about a place that's inhabited by 13 civilizations. All of the writers are sharing notes, and I think that helps a lot when it comes to, at the very least, when it comes to creating something where your group is going to be interacting with these other groups a lot. Then it's a lot easier to go, oh, well, they're creating this kind of people, and my people are very focused on these things, so they probably get along really well on these specific topics, and maybe they don't get along so great on these other topics, and it makes everything feel more natural and more real.
Yeah, because if these folks have been existing alongside in some way, shape, or form for hundreds of years, there's going to be influence, because everybody influences everybody, and nobody's going to be siloed when they're all living here. Because you're talking about, it's Los Angeles. Everything's going to affect everything.
Yeah.
They did mention, how they all still maintain a clear identity. All of the adventures, it seems like, are broken up into, particular civilizations, so you get to experience them. They outlined 3 of them that are in there. One's called Ways of Vice, and it's a level 5 adventure, and it's set in a very Afro-Caribbean culture. There's another one called Orchids of the Invisible Mountain, and it's described as being a multi-planar adventure, so I'm guessing you're going to a lot of different places. It's level 14, so you're probably going to a lot of very dangerous places. But it was described as having a very Fey influence, and that interested me because I was under the impression that we were all coming from human cultures in this, because obviously there are no Fey creatures who wrote this, unless Alon had a side gig that he didn't tell us about. But I'm curious to read that one, because I'm wondering sort of what the cultural mythological influence on that was, given the backgrounds the backgrounds of the writers on this one, because I have a feeling it's not your standard Fey, Eladrin kind of situation going on there. It has to be something a little bit different and a little bit deeper to fit in with what they're trying to do in this book. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, but I would be very disappointed if it was just standard Fey stuff.
You'll be really disappointed if it's pointy-eared elves in the forest with the Fey creatures.
Yes, pointy-eared elves in the forest. My D&D bugaboo that I absolutely hate, because every game seems to revolve around that, and I would just like something different. But it's
Yeah,
fine.
I don't know, just based off of the name being Orchids of the Invisible Mountain, I don't know what's going to be involved in that, but I'm genuinely very curious, and I'm excited to read it and see what kinds of plot hooks they've got in there, because hell yeah.
Yeah. And the other one they talked about, it's called Fiend of the Hollow Mind. It's a level 4, and it is very clearly, transparently Dia de los Muertos. Aja was talking about it in the interview, just saying like, yeah, there's one day a year where the dead actually come back and they can interact with their families and everything. I'm sure there's a bit more of a twist to it somewhere there, to give it, some appropriate flavor. But I don't know. I kind of like and don't like how it's like, yeah, we're taking this well-known cultural thing and we're just doing this with it. I was kind of hoping, and maybe we'll see this with some of the other ones, I was kind of hoping that they would twist it enough to where maybe I would have to think a little bit to recognize what they were drawing from. And maybe that's the case with all the other ones. And maybe the twist on Fiend of the Hollow Mind is going to be something that I didn't even see coming. But just looking at the art for it and the description, I was like, hey, wait a minute. That's not very subtle at all.
Well, there is, as part of Dios de los Muertos, there is something that I think not a ton of people know, which is that it is still a little bit of a spooky day. Mm-hmm. Like, it's all about celebrating family, but it's also, there are bits of interacting with the undead that aren't entirely safe. Mm-hmm. And so there's like part of the, being able to offer things like sugar skulls and things like that is for your protection.
So wait a minute. It's not entirely safe. It's dangerous. It's all about family. I think you've just stumbled onto the plot of Fast 10.
Fast 10, family finds a way in the afterlife.
Like I was saying, I hope that there's a twist in there that is a little bit different than just what I'm expecting from it.
Yeah, I mean, I think even if it's just something where they're like, hey, let's explore this topic from an angle that not a lot of media does, mm-hmm. I think that's going to be cool. Yeah. I think that's going to be a good time.
And so we don't know anything else about any of the other adventures that are in there. But one thing did show up on Facebook today while we were getting ready. And it was, I think it's for a level 5 adventure. I can't remember the name of it. But it says dancers wanted, safety not guaranteed. And it has like a drawing of a dancer over on the right side. And it says wanted, someone to take a dance on an erupting volcano with me. This is not a joke. Ask for Alan at the Twin Gods Observatory. You'll get paid after we get back. Must bring your own weapons. Safety not guaranteed. I have only done this once before. Now, obviously, that's just the classic meme that they've repurposed for D&D. However, if that actually appears in this book, it will be worth the MSRP for that. I don't really have anything like substantive to say other than it's really stupid and I love it.
I want so badly.
This better be a quest hook.
The whole premise of that quest hook to be that no one believes that volcano is active except this guy.
I think you've just written something that needs to be published if it is not actually in the book like that. One more thing is that they're touting 11 new monsters that are going to be in here. So not exactly like a big bestiary or anything like that, but they're just trying to add some new things, probably with a bit of an ethereal twist. Probably some of them are going to be influenced by the material plane areas that you can go to. One of them was called, I didn't write this down in the show notes, but one of them was called like the Whistler, I think. And it just the description, and there may have even been some sketch art that I saw of it, but it gave off very much like a Slender Man vibe.
Ooh.
But don't quote me on that because I could be wrong.
I do like me some Slender Men.
Yeah, exactly. Bill Slenderman. So anyways, that's really sort of the long and short of what we, and I mean we as in me and Josh, not just the general public, know about Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel. I'm excited for it. I'm more excited for it than I thought I would be if you'd asked me 3 weeks ago. Just because I learned a lot about it while I was researching why I didn't want to talk about it, and it changed my mind.
Yeah, It is nice to have our minds changed in a positive way when it comes to Wizards content.
Yeah.
We're so accustomed to having the opposite be the case.
Yeah, pretty much. So Josh, do you have anything to add as we wrap up talking about Radiant Citadel?
Well, I mean, just generally, I'm excited conceptually for the book. I'm a lot more excited than I anticipated being. Mm-hmm. I am really looking forward to having some conversations with folks about what we find once I get my hands on a copy.
Yep.
Again, like, as you and I so frequently talk about, I don't think I'm going to ever end up running this stuff. But I love books like these because they broaden my creative horizons and allow me to build things that I never would have thought to build before I read them.
Yeah, and like we talked about too, like representationally, it's a nice maybe quarter or half step forward. It's at least forward motion.
It is the appropriate gesture to put a little salve over the Candlekeep Mysteries debacle.
So run out and get yours from your friendly local gaming store tomorrow, and then tell us what you think about it. Jump on the Discord, bit.ly/Goblin Discord in the G&G podcast channel, and tell us how wrong we are about our takes, and tell us what yours are, and maybe we'll read some of them on the air. Tell us what we got wrong, or we'll do one of those swell corrections for you, because I know Snapshot loved that when he got to listen. He got to listen to us call him right on the podcast. He's like, that was a fantastic correction.
Everybody wants to hear that they were correct.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to be a bit more private in your criticism or praise, I'm at Way of Brandalore on Twitter. Josh, what are you?
I'm at BlackCloakDM on Twitter.
And go ahead.
We combined are at Goblins Growlers on Twitter.
That's true. And as always, we appreciate any 5-star reviews that you want to leave on your podcast platform of choice. If it's less than a 5-star review, please send it to us privately so we can address your concerns and boost you up from a 3 to a 4 to a 4.5 or to a 5. So you can leave it publicly. That would be swell. Telephone, telegraph, tell a friend about the Goblins and Growlers podcast. Get it in front of as many people as you can. Have an awkward situation where you invite a friend over and you say, hey, I really would like you to listen to this for a few minutes. And then you sit on the couch for the whole hour awkwardly while they try to find a way to get out of this circumstance, but you won't let them.
Tell a group of friends that you're having a party, and then when they arrive, lock them inside and make them listen to the podcast as a group. It'll be a great time and no one will murder you.
Exactly. All right. Well, I think that's all we've got for this time. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a topic yet to be decided. That's what we spent about an hour before recording this episode trying to figure out. But we'll see you then.
Bye, y'all.